talk to Jamie Perry, and a local NRCS, or Indiana Department of Agriculture.
Indiana State
Department of Agriculture, sorry. I mumbled that one. We're going to record this for presentation later. Please have your audio on mute unless talking. We'll use chat, and we'll be monitoring the chat function also, so you can talk either on chat or on ask us questions or on live. I'm Mike Whirling, a technical specialist agronomist here at the SWCD and a conservation advocate using restorative agriculture on my farm. So again, we're recording this, so you'll be able to get it later. So we have Jamie Perry, and I'm going to jump right into him. He's going to tell us all about mulching. Go ahead, Jamie.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jamie Perry. I'm with the Indiana Association of Soil and Water District, and I'm an urban soil health specialist. And so what we're going to talk about today is basically the basics of mulching. When people think about mulching, they think about, maybe mulching their trees, maybe mulching their garden, and there's so much more. And mulching, like during the winter, putting their garden to bed. But there's so many other benefits that maybe people don't think about. So we're going to discuss those today. I really want to make sure that everybody asks questions. Feel free. It will make the presentation a lot more interesting. I have no problem with that. And you don't necessarily have to wait to the end. So go ahead at any point and ask any questions you might have. And I guess we'll get started. Thank you very much. So there we go. A mulch is any material applied to the soil surface for protection or improvement of the area covered. And I think that's a key aspect that people don't think about is the protection. Because you'll be protecting your soil, because your soil is a vital resource. And, and some of the benefits of mulching may not be what people think about. As you can see here, we have straw on the right and some wood chips with looks like some potatoes. And there's a lot of good benefits for that. This is Elaine Ingham, and her big thing is Mother Nature abhors bare soil. So she is a microbiologist with her emphasis in soil microbiology. She's kind of what's known as, I would say she's probably one of the main figures in the soil web, talking about it. And I put this on here because I really want to show people what, the soil web and what it entails and all the different life, everything from bacteria, the organic matter, that's where a lot of it would start with your mulching, to your bacteria and your fungi, nematodes, protozoans, and then you got your other end, you got your arthropods, which will mulch down on your mulch. And so I really just wanted to kind of give a quick shout out for soil health. Because one of the main principles of soil health is keeping your soil covered. And by doing that, you're protecting it, you're relieving compaction, you're keeping compaction from happening, and really protecting your soil from the elements. Mulching is not something new. Nature's been doing this for billions of years. If you really think about it, you have all your trees growing in the forest, and there's no fertilizer in the forest. So how could you go wrong with mulching? And so nature produces a large quantity of mulch at all times with fallen leaves, as you can see here. I'm a big fan of fallen leaves, using those in my garden and stuff. Pine needles. Now, people have this aversion to pine needles. I'm not saying you would use this as your sole mulch, but as a partial mulch, and they think that it'll cause their soil to go acidic. It may a little bit if you incorporate it when it's green right away, but once it turns brown and placed it on the surface, using it as a mulch, you won't have any concerns with that. This is actually through the Oregon Extension Office that it's their information. So just want to share that with you. Twigs, pieces of bark, spent flower blossoms, fallen fruit, and other organic matter. Now, when you go to like other countries, and and there's been examples of this, Singing Frog Farms, they were actually with the Peace Corps, and they went to other countries, and it wasn't, some of the stuff wasn't available, so they were really digging and searching for really unique organic matter. And really, truly, all you really need for mulching is an organic matter, something that breaks down and something that covers the soil. So we just talk about the more popular stuff, but truly, I mean, that's really all you need. As long as it gets good coverage and it's some organic matter, then you should be fine. Of course, with the exception of synthetics, and we will talk about that as well. There we go. So let's talk about some of the benefits. So mulch prevents loss of water from the soil by evaporation. So when that's one of the great things, especially with the water bills being how much they cost, I can attest this. I had a corn patch and utilized heavy mulch. And I'll be honest with you, even during some of our really rough Indiana summers here, I never had to water it because I used a really deep mulch of wood chips, believe it or not. And my corn was real successful, and my sweet corn, real successful, and I didn't have any problems with it. And this is my favorite. It reduces the growth of weeds. I hate weeding. I'll be totally honest with you. When the mulch material itself, and as long as the mulch material itself is weed-free and it's applied deep enough, that's the key. Mulch material itself is weed-free. So when you start getting into hay and straw, you might have some challenges there. And also that other aspect is you can't just lightly put it on. You really make sure it has deep enough to prevent weed seeds from germinating or to smother the existing weeds. Mulch keeps the soil cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter, thus maintaining a more even soil temperature. And that will really assist your microbial life. Sometimes though, with the mulch, this could be a bad thing, depending on what you're trying to grow and when you're trying to start it. So we'll cover that a little later on. Mulch prevents soil splashing. So as the rains come down, they're gently absorbed and they're not splashing from the soil, hitting that direct soil contact, which not only stops erosion, but keeps the soil-borne diseases from splashing up onto the plants. Maybe it's something you didn't think about as a disease preventer. And it provides habitat for beneficial organisms, both macro and micro. So then we're talking about, like we mentioned earlier, with that good soil web picture I showed you earlier. You're giving it just a real good place for the arthropods to live, and places for the fungi, and the bacteria and different things that break down that mulch. It gives it a great place for these beneficial organisms. Oh, right there, talked about it already. It acts as a fodder for certain microbes that digest the carbonaceous material. And then also when it releases it, or when it absorbs it, digests it, it then slowly releases it in the form of that plants can absorb. So by using mulches, you're actually adding to the fertility of your soil. The organic mulches can improve the soil structure. As it decays and moves down into the soil, the organic matter improves the quality of your topsoil. Decaying mulch also adds nutrients, like I mentioned earlier, to your soil. So those of you, it'll actually over time, if you continue using it, it will increase your organic matter. For example, Broxenberry Farms, they use a deep mulch method. It's not a typical one. It's the use of compost, because compost itself can be a mulch, although a very expensive one. And their nutrients are off the charts. And also their organic matters are really high as well, even to the point where they're starting to have to pull back a little bit from that, from those practices, and not do quite as much as they had been. But if you ever seen their produce, I promise you, you can see the benefits of definitely a deep mulching system. Mulch prevents crusting of the soil surface. Now, a raindrop, believe it or not, it travels at 20 miles per hour. And imagine that force hitting bare soil. So when it does that, it creates a crusting-like effect, which is basically you're sealing off the surface of your soil, although not really thick, but still a sealing off. And then that will impact your infiltration of water, and thus could cause some erosion, and your water will just run off instead of actually being absorbed into your soil. So that's the other benefit of mulch. And we talked about preventing compaction. Mulch also helps prevent compaction. So by doing that, mulching, you're not getting that crusting, and over time that compaction as well. Mulch plants have more roots than plants that are not mulched, because the plants will produce additional roots in the mulch that surrounds them. This is absolutely true. We're going to talk about some examples of like different mulch types, and the plants actually get some nutrients out of the broken down material and utilize that stuff, especially when you're talking about broken down wood chips or things of that nature, or leaf mulch, excuse me. Okay, what is the best kind of mulch? Well, truthfully, they've all got pros and cons, and it's basically the one you can acquire locally. There should be no reason why, especially folks that live in the city limits or in the county, certain county areas, or city areas like New Haven, Fort Wayne, that don't have access to a really cheap mulch, especially those with yards with lots of trees. And also for like wood chips, you can contact various tree trimming services. I bet they'd be more than happy to give up some of their wood chips to you. What we're going to do first is we're going to talk about some mulching options. So we're talking about some various kinds of options and see what we have out there, and discuss them, pros and cons, and see, yeah, let's talk about it like that. Trees are amazing producers of biomass. Deciduous leaves contain a well-balanced nutrients. And there's actually some farmers that, other than, maybe some basic mineral amendments, use this as their primary source of nutrients, believe it or not. If they go to the trouble of breaking it down, using a wood chipper or something along them lines, and they actually spread this along the surface in a no-till kind of situation. I'm not going to be able to quote the grower right now off the top of my head, but if there's interest, he wrote a book, and if there's any interest, you can, I'll share my email with y'all at the end of the presentation, and you can email me later and I can give the information on the book. But yeah, he collected large amounts of leaves and actually spread those on the surface, and he actually got quite a bit of success with that. It feeds the soil life and the plants, lots of minerals, lots of, I mean, if it helps a forest and it supports those trees, you can't go wrong with it. Keep that in mind. It's broken down by the fungi and converted to plant available nutrients. Now, here's some of the challenges. If it's fresh, they can create a mat and it can suffocate, lack of oxygen, cause the water to be just to run off the surface, and it needs to be shredded, or you can use a wood chipper or a lawnmower, where you could take a lawnmower and just run over your leaves, and actually they'll do the work for you. Now, I know, and if you don't, have a densely packed garden bed with some leaf mulch, then you should be okay without doing that. But generally speaking, if you're going to do something that's going to work really well, you definitely need to add it to a wood chipper or a mower with a lawnmower, and use that on your garden. And it's a great mulch. Straw. Now, this is what a lot of people know about. It's available in small square bales. You can get it at a local store, or, maybe a little cheaper, get it, find a local grower that might have access to straw farmer, and maybe sells it out from his house or something like that. It's light and easy to spread, and this is more for a protection, aspect of it, because it doesn't contain a high level concentration of nutrients. It does break down pretty quick. It can be applied after planting. That's good. It keeps the soil surface cool. That could be an issue.
You find them dirty? What all you have to do?
Thank you very much. So keeps the soil surface cool. That could be an issue though. You know, if you think about it, if you're out here trying to grow tomatoes or corn and you need that heat and you've got that heavy mulch there, it could be cooling the surface of your soil because that's naturally what a mulch will do. It will actually could prolong you or delay, I should say, the germination of your seeds, or it could impact the growth of your plant because it's not getting that warm root temperature that it might desire. Just a thought and something to have to consider. Some downsides of straw. It could be expensive if you're really looking at large scale, trying to utilize this. It could have seeds. And there could be now, you know, and then this is where knowing your source, it could have chemical residues. Some farmers spray a post-emergent herbicide on their straw, and prior to, I'm sorry, I'm having a moment here, but and that stuff could be still contained on their. It could be contained. It can infect your garden. So just something to consider. Not necessarily. I've used it for quite a few years. Never had any problems with the herbicide aspect of it, but I would be negligent if I didn't discuss this with everybody. Hay, high in nutrients, keeps the soil cool. It will have seeds, and they're as like straw, there will be a potential herbicide risk, but it has a lot of nutrients, unlike straw. So again, depending on your situation, it's like grass. If you think about it, hay is nothing more than a grass that's been dried. So keep that in mind. I didn't really list grass in this one, but grass is a great mulch. It does break down pretty fast, but it's still a good mulch, and there's a lot of nutrients in that. So those of you who maybe take their mow their lawns and don't mulch it into their crops and stuff, or mulch it into their grass, then and collect it, maybe you could use that for that garden. That way it doesn't go to waste and it actually has some benefit.
Hey, Jamie, could I interrupt you just for a minute? While we
Sure, absolutely, please.
We have a question on the chat. If the leaves are not fresh, do they need to be shredded?
Yes, I'd highly recommend it. It would make for a better mulch.
Thank you.
So this is a little unusual one. This is cardboard. So cardboard is it's a waste product, and it could be going. I know people talk about recycling it and stuff, but if you have access to it, it makes for a great mulching option. Now there's a little extra work that's involved, but as far as a weed killer, there's nothing like it. And it biodegrades, and don't be concerned about the aspect of possibly blocking off water or anything like that, because that's really a non-issue. It works really well. Couple exceptions. You need to make sure that it's not shiny or has color ink. You want to use that brown cardboard with black ink only. And also, just so you know, the worms love this stuff. And there's actually farms out there that lay down a heavy matting of cardboard and then add compost right to the top of it. And that's how, and then when it comes time to flip the bed, they actually then lay cardboard right over top of that and then add compost to that, and just to alleviate their any weed issues they may have. So these are just various options, and I just want to present them to you. But avoid produce boxes, because they can have be sprayed for bugs and things that might have chemicals on them. A good choice would, believe it or not, would be like a refrigerator box or something like that. If you had access to, like, maybe go to Lowe's and say, hey, you got any boxes from like refrigerators? They're large, and they typically meet the requirements like we talked about. Remove all your tape, because they won't biodegrade. Apply multiple layer sheets against the soil surface. And that's key, because if you just, as you see here, they're kind of like pressing up against each other. You definitely want that overlapping to keep weeds from coming up. And then while you're applying it, for your sanity, make sure you wet the cardboard while applying, and that will kind of keep it pasted down a little bit, especially during a windy day. And I wouldn't recommend trying to do this on a windy day. It gets pretty rough. And then after, another great thing about it is you can then apply compost or another mulch, such as wood chips and things. Maybe this might be an aesthetic reason for doing so. But yeah, cardboard makes a great mulch. Let's talk about wood chips. It is an abundant resource. It's great for walkways. Now, the jury's kind of mixed on the whole using it in beds, because there is some challenges with nitrogen tie-up, like the nitrogen in your soil is being, used up to break down the wood chips. And keep in mind that only takes place where the actual wood chips make contact with the soil, and in very, very small portion of the soil, but it's still a nitrogen tie-up. So keep that in mind when utilizing those wood chips. And again, the jury's still out on that. Some people really, really get into using them, and we'll talk about that in a second. And some folks are against them for the reasons I mentioned. Some other challenges, slugs, because it's got that nice moist area and stuff, and slugs absolutely love it. So, and then other insects, it may be a home for other insects. So keep that in mind when you utilize this resource. I used it as well, like I talked about earlier. I've used it in a corn patch, and I had a lot of success. Didn't have any issues. Corn is a big nitrogen feeder, and it produced pretty good ears of corn. So I really didn't have too many problems with it. But again, I want to share all the information with everybody out there. Now, some notes. If you've ever heard of Back to Eden Garden before, go and Google that. There's a whole documentary on it. It's a grower out in Washington State. And what he did was he had access to a lot of it, and was initially he was just throwing the wood chips directly on the ground, really deep. And he was using not fresh wood chips, but wood chips that have been sitting for about a year, and was planting directly in that, and had a lot of success. However, he has since revised his methods, and now he recommends doing the cardboard mulch, like we talked about previously, and 3 to 4 inches of compost, and then 3 to 4 inches of wood chips. And he's very successful. You can find plenty of YouTube videos on it. It's called Back to Eden. So, and you'll hear both sides of it. You might hear some things about termites and some other things like that. So again, just make your own choice on what works best for you. And again, there's a documentary free you can watch on the process, and he goes into great detail sharing his information. Are there any questions, Mike?
Well, we have another one here. When you're mulching with cardboard, the timing of it, before or after planting, can you expand a little bit more on that one?
Sure, absolutely. So I would recommend doing it before planting. And then thank you for bringing that up. That's a really good point. I would do it before planting, and then it's mainly really good for like transplants. And then you would lay it down, lay your mulch down. And that mulch could not only be wood chips, it could actually be compost as well. That's called a deep mulching method, utilizing compost. And we're talking about 3 to 4 inches of compost. And then when you do those transplants, you can just take a knife, or depending on how soft or how wet you got your cardboard, you can maybe open up with your fingers and do your transplants directly in the holes. So you would do it prior to, create some holes, and then transplant your produce into that. So that's basically how that would work. Any other questions, Mike?
Nope, that's all of them right now. So
thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Very nice.
So now we're going to get into synthetics. So synthetic mulches, again, aren't a lot of the commercial growers use them. There's a lot, I want to give out all the options. May not be necessary for gardeners, but large scale commercial, people that actually do this for a living, utilize some of these synthetic mulches. And you got a couple options. First one being a plastic mulch, and the second would be landscape fabrics. So the benefits of that is plastic, black plastic will warm the soil, so you can get out certain crops earlier because of a warm soil temperature, such as tomatoes. I know that Elliott Coleman, for example, very well-known grower in Maine, is able to put melons out early in Maine, utilizing black plastic. So it warms the soil, controls weeds. Now, let's talk about moisture. It retains moisture, but you're going to have to, with a plastic, you're going to have some type of watering, irrigation underneath the plastic, because though it's impermeable, so therefore the water just runs off. And may not be the best option, but that's some of the downfalls of using a plastic. And it generally is a one-time use. So therefore you have, issues with landfills and things of that nature. Next one would be landscape fabric. It has some of the same attributes, except water will run through them. And with the landscape fabric, you can definitely get multiple uses. Now, a really key thing, or a little tip, I should say, is if you make all your garden beds the same length and width, then you can definitely interchange that landscape fabric after you use it. So when the growing season is over with, you can pack this away and you don't need to label it, because every piece of landscape fabric will fit over another bed. So you definitely want to keep this in mind. Some of the issues is cost. It is kind of spendy, and they don't sell them in really small. Well, they do, but the quality stuff, they don't sell in real small sizes. So you'd have to order a decent amount, and of course the waste that's involved. But like I said, the landscape fabric can be used year after year after year. And I've got a picture here. That's what landscape fabric. This is really, if you look at it, it's kind of a cheaper landscape fabric. The quality stuff is a lot thicker, and it has yellow lines. And you really, if you choose to go this route, you definitely want to spend the money on it, because you get more use out of it, and it'll last a lot longer. We're talking like 10 years or something if taken care of. So you definitely get a lot of use out of it. And remember, try to get, like you see in this picture here, try to keep your beds the same, because that way you get more use out of your landscape fabric. Now we're going to talk about cover crops. I'm going to ask Mike to kind of chime in here in a minute. This is a class all of its own. So definitely want to keep that in mind. Cover crops are crops that do not have cash value. They are grown to enhance soil health. And an option you could do is you could plant cereal rye and then grow it to maturity. And then right before, like I said, right before when it starts reaching reproductive maturity, you can crimp it. Now, by crimping it, you then have killed off effectively the cereal rye, and it makes a great mulch, and definitely something you could plant into. Mike, can you share some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm routinely planting that way now. I plant the cereal rye in my standing corn, or after the oats or wheat ground in the summertime, and let it overwinter. It'll survive winter. And last spring, because it was a wet year and a late planting time, the cereal rye was up to the hood of my tractor, so about 5.5 foot tall. It's a challenge to plant with a planter, but then I planted and I rolled it afterwards. Some guys roll it first and then plant in it. Lays that mulch down there that is 2 inches thick, and that'll survive most of the summer. So you're protecting your soil from any raindrops, any erosion, and you're keeping the moisture underneath that. And the soil life is just amazing that work under that type of a mat. So in a gardening, I see your picture here. She probably has a board or something on there that she's walking, just stomping it down with a board. Roller crimpers are available, not too many small ones yet that like we use in the farm scale. But it's amazing what that does to soil life.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. I really do appreciate that input. So let's move on. Now, when it comes to, you guys, something to consider, we talked about temperatures earlier. Thicker isn't always better because like we said, it could potentially impact the temperature of your soil, which in turn would cause, affect your germination and affect, the root temperature for your plants. So it has that insulating effect. It has a slower spring warm up. Here's some of the solutions here, and depending on what kind of you use, and this is really more made for like the straws and your hay type situation. When it comes to like compost warms up really well. Cardboard, it's a non-issue for the most part. Wood chips may have some problems. I did have a slower germination on the corn when I used it. Just something to keep in mind. But what some of the solutions is in the early spring, rake back the mulch onto your walkways. You apply compost to the bed, which will give you a nice warming, or work with just bare soil, depending on what your situation is. Seed, then transplant. And when the temperature warms up, rake the mulch back onto the beds. And when it's appropriate, once the plants have germinated and you're comfortable with how large they are, then go ahead and rake that mulch back on your bed. And that'll provide all the benefits we talked about. Because when it comes to like the soil health principles and things, you just do the best you can with your situation. But if you're adhering to them, adhering to keeping the soil covered, you're definitely doing a world of good for your garden.
Jamie, can I chime in again?
Please.
A question, can you have cover crops interseeded under your produce? If so, which ones would be best to grow with your produce? And
you know what? There's been a lot of discussion of that, and I'm speaking through. I talked to Kevin Allison, which he's pretty known throughout the state as having expertise in cover crops when it comes down to interplantings. You can definitely plant something ahead of time, maybe. And I'm trying to, Mike, you got any input on this? I'm trying to think of the name of it.
Yeah, depending the crop you're growing, the Native Americans here, the Indians, when the Pilgrims landed, were using corn, squash, and beans together.
Sure.
I think didn't they call it the Holy Trinity or something like that, or the
Three Sisters.
Three Sisters. Sorry, yeah.
Holy Trinity. Hey, I could go with Holy Trinity. So we're good.
No, Holy Trinity. I'm mixing up my cooking. That's the New Orleans blends they put in. Sorry. So there's a lot of plants that are not competition but companion crops, and buckwheat is one of them that hits me really good with corn, because I've already had that in, and I'm really trying to figure out how to interseed that to get it to grow with it through the year. Buckwheat's our #1 plant for making phosphorus there available. The cereal rye, there's another question here about, can cereal rye be planted now, crimped and planted into midsummer? That might not be quite the best growth time for it. It will probably it'll probably work. But if you want to plant it the same year, that would be better. First thing in February or March, the first day you got a warm growth, and you can broadcast that, and it will grow early. So when the weather starts getting warmer. So cover crops, interseeding, we're doing that in our corn crops now. We're planting at ankle to knee high, and we have actually the IASWCD has a tool to do that farming wise. yield, field size. And we're having some luck with that. Last year, or some years when it's really wet or really dry, that's a tougher one because it's a crop that has to grow down in the canopy in the shadows, and they don't always survive as well. But that one's an up and coming one that I think is going to get a lot more attention. So there's a lot of resources out here, or if you want to dive deeper into that, give us a call up here at the SWCD. We'll put the information on or email, and we can go into that farther.
You know, something else to think about too is utilizing like interplanting lettuce with some of your produce, using that as almost a way of keeping your crops covered, keeping your soil covered. And so you know, say you have tomato plants, and you can interplant lettuces and things of that nature, you know, to protect your soil and provide maybe kind of like a natural mulching. So just, you know, these are just different ideas. And I really appreciate Mike's input on that.
If I may jump in again, any of the high carbon to nitrogen sources of mulch or covers, Sierra rye is a high one, 82 to 1, something like that. Wood bark, and there's a few others. They're going to deplete nitrogen out of the soil to decay. The good part about my farming system is it returns that in an available form about pollination time and seed set time, which is when the corn plant needs the most nitrogen. I'm putting down nitrogen with my planter a little more than you would expect to make up for that difference of the depletion during decay. So some of the nitrogen loving crops, it might be better to get a nitrogen source there with it also. Thinking legumes, the clovers, hairy vetch, something like that. You can raise your own nitrogen. In my fields this year, just as an estimate, I probably have 100 pounds plus growing out in my field that I'm raising myself, and just through the cover crops. So there's other plants that can do that. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I really appreciate your input on this, Mike. As far as for a gardening aspect, if you chose not to go that direction, and you had concerns about the nitrogen policing from these high carbon materials on your garden beds, then you could apply like a blood meal or a feather meal or something like that onto the surface of the soil before applying, and rake that into your soil, and that will maybe break up, you know, maybe make up for some of that. Now, as far as amounts and stuff, you know, but I would say if you have a good, healthy soil, I think that might provide some assistance in that as well. Okay, that concludes my presentation on mulches. Are there any additional questions?
I have a couple.
Go ahead.
In my yard, I had some shrubs that died, and I believe it was probably from, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but verticillium wilt. And the same year, there were a couple of red buds in the neighborhood that died too. So I think it was weather, you know, making it worse, but it was kind of a gradual over the years. And it just looked like that. So I'm wondering if I have gotten wood chips at the composting site before and brought them home to mulch my landscaping. Is it possible that that wilt could come from wood chips and spread into my garden? Or does it not work that way?
You know what? I'll be totally honest with you. I apologize in advance. That is not my area of expertise. I'm more of a produce expertise. So as far as that, I'm sorry, I can't get the answer. I apologize.
Yeah. Then the other question I had is, might be the same situation. Artillery fungus. I brought that home from when I bought mulch. Organic mulch locally from a lumber place that after I put it down, I found out our neighbor had gotten some there and they had artillery fungus, and then we developed artillery fungus. So do I need to rake off what's there or let it finish decomposing so that there's no more fungus available before I put more wood chips on? I mean, it's just going to keep growing in what I put on, correct?
Right. Yeah, I agree. It'll just keep growing. Yeah, that's my opinion anyway. but again,
Yeah.
it's not my area of expertise. But yeah,
Right.
definitely be something. And anytime you get, introduce these products, like I said, especially with wood chips, it's fungal dominant, so you're really going to have a lot of fungal life in your soil versus some other stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's always a risk, definitely. I'm
Doesn't
sorry you had
matter
such
if
a
it's
hard
out in the
time
back.
with it.
If it's out in the backyard, it doesn't matter. But if it's out in the front of my landscaping, it gets on my siding. It doesn't go away. They can't. Our neighbors could not get it off. They changed their siding.
I'll be okay.
Yeah.
Well, sorry to hear you're having those problems.
Yeah.
We have a couple more on the chat room. One of them, what cover crops can I use during the summer that can be killed off by crimping within 4 to 6 weeks and planted into late summer, August timeframe? Let me speak to it, and then you can add to that one. To make crimping work successfully, it has to be a cereal grain that's jointed. The cereal rye is a good one. Oats will do it. All them cereal ryes do not grow good in hot weather. They're more of a cool planting season. So that one I have to think about. I don't know if there is a way to crimp it. You could terminate it other ways with any of the green ones with the tarp or tilling. I don't do tillage, but there's other ways to terminate them. Any thought on that one, Jamie?
Let me just run something past you real quick, Mike. What are your thoughts on buckwheat? Not necessarily for crimping, but taking them and using a flail mower or something like that in order to break it up, like a lawnmower type situation, mulching them up and using those on your beds as well.
Well, I think a lawnmower, that is a good point. Something that's going to kill as you mow it. Grasses wouldn't be so good because they're going to regrow.
Right.
The ones that'll take it off. Buckwheat is a favorite one. I tell guys that are skeptical about that to take it, put a little in a drill and in a farm field, and go diagonally across the field and just see what happens in the next couple of years. And you can see that green strip for 3-4 years after you plant it. So because of the phosphorus availability. So
yeah, there you go. Now, based on the SARE book on cover crops, it doesn't last as long as a mulch, but it makes a pretty good initial mulch. Do you have any experience with that at all, Mike, as far as that piece?
Not too much, no. I don't know if I can
speak to that. Yeah, it does break down pretty fast. This is just from the vegetable produce type situation. So yes, sir.
Yeah. Another question we have: what do you do with your mulch when you need to direct seed?
Okay, so it would be just like we talked about before. You can actually just peel it back, do your direct seed, and then once you're happy with where your plants are at, then you can reapply that mulch. But that is a challenge of mulching. Is it requires some transplanting, or if you direct seed, you would have to pull the mulch back in order to do so.
Here's another comment, and I love it when you guys start thinking. If you mulch first with fresh grass clippings and then cover with leaves, will this offset the nitrogen tie-up?
It could. It's actually not a bad thought. Something to consider for certain.
Yeah.
Mike, what do you think?
I think so. Yeah. Grass is not as high as carbon nitrogen, so there might be better options, maybe legume or something. But I'm sure that would offset some, especially if you have a high nitrogen area.
Yeah. So I agree. I'll have to agree with that. That's actually a way to think. That's not a bad idea. Any further questions, Mike?
If they have any questions, the questions on the fungus and the other things, the Master Gardeners hotline, and Joel has put it on our chat room here, 260-481-6425. They're a good resource. And the Purdue Extension offices are good resources on a lot of things also. Ours would be James Wolfe here in Allen County. the other counties all have them. So some more resources. Do we have any other questions? What do you guys have? I know I can hear you thinking. Maybe we'll let them think a little longer, and I'll switch it up here just a little. And Joelle is from our office here, and she can speak on the program we have running, the Urban and Small Farms, and an upcoming exciting tour that you guys can join in next week. Joelle.
Yeah, so you're gonna be able to hear me, but you'll be seeing Mike the whole time. But I'm Joelle Neff. I am the lead on the Urban and Small Farms program here in Allen County, and we cover parts of 6 different counties that are in the Western Lake Erie Basin watershed. So those parts of counties, Allen, Adams, DeKalb, Steuben, Wells, and Noble counties. So we're able to cover parts of that. And if we don't cover your county, Jamie Perry's program with the Indiana Association of Soil and Water Districts, they also have an urban program, and they can help you in any capacity. They can provide assistance. We can do that as well, answer questions, do soil testing. We're just here to help our urban farmers and our small farmers and gardeners and community gardens. So we're here for you if you ever need anything. Jamie, real quick, could you stop sharing your screen? Perfect. I'm going to share next Monday is our farm tour of the Mary Lee Environmental Learning Center. So this is going to be a really good tour. They have really good soil health practices. And as you can see, they use some landscape fabric for some mulching. I don't know what other mulching practices they use, but we'll be able to learn on that farm tour. They also have some animals on the farm, such as goats. I think they have chickens as well. The Mary Lee Environmental Center is through Goshen College, and it's one of the top-rated school farms in the nation. So we're going to be taking that tour next Monday, May 23rd, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And that's in Albion, Indiana. So you don't have to go all the way to Goshen. It's right by Wolf Lake out in Albion. But we'd love for you to join us from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And to register for that, all you have to do is call our office. And I'll put that number in the chat, but it's 260-484-5848. Extension 3. And I know some of you on here are already registered or already RSVP'd for the event. So we're looking forward to see you on Monday of next week. So we just ask that you would get there just a little bit before 10, just so that we can start our tour at 10. But again, it's going to be a really amazing tour that we have coming up on Monday.
If you guys are familiar with the Chain of Lake State Park, it's right on the south side of that also. Up by in Albion.
And real quick, we also, I just want to give a plug for next month's coffee and webinar. I want to say a huge thank you to Jamie Perry first off for all that he did today. I really learned a lot about mulching that I didn't know. So I'm excited to apply some of those things in my home garden. But next month's coffee and will be once again on a Tuesday on June 21st. And this will be a 2-hour webinar versus 1 hour from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And in June, we actually are going to have an in-person option. So it'll be both virtual and in person, which we're really excited to start doing. And that will be at Bob Arnold Park. The address is right here. It's 2510 Parnell Avenue, Fort Wayne, Indiana. So if you just go to our website, you'll be able to register, and I'll be sending that information out. And just let us know whether you're going to be coming in person or virtually. We're really excited to see some of you in person, which we've not been able to do before. So we're excited for that.
Yeah, Jamie, excuse me for mumbling your position.
Oh, it's all right. I know who I am. It's fine.
Can you speak more about what you're doing and what your focus is? And
Sure. Again, I'm an urban soil health specialist. I work for the Indiana Association of Soil and Water Districts. So if you want to make it simplified, I kind of work for a state level organization. I cover 22 counties. So everything from St. Joseph County to the Ohio state line and the Michigan state line and down to clear to Madison counties, where like Ball State, not in Anderson and adjacent counties like where Ball State is, things of that nature. And I give talks, I do presentations, just like stuff like this. I go work with growers. I work with gardeners too. They really just want to get things started, and they really want to, and my emphasis is, of course, soil health, with the soil health principles, of course, biodiversity, keeping it covered, keeping living roots, and keeping and minimize your disturbance. So those are the gospel I'm preaching, so to speak. And but mine's on, unlike Mike is very knowledgeable on cover crops, and his scope or lens is large ag. Mine's smaller and working with couple acres, acre gardener, stuff like that. Not that Mike couldn't educate me on that, but that's just my level of emphasis. So that's what I do. I get to go out and talk to people, whole soil classes and things of that nature.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap between the urban gardening and the larger agriculture farming. It's all the same microbes in the soil we're working with. So
Sure.
That's exciting. I loved when you started talking about the soil life. Jill Clapperton, a microbiologist, also, it's been up here a number of times. She'll say a tablespoon of soil you can put in your hand. I'll say you grab a handful of soil, and there's more active organisms in your hand than there are people on Earth right now. So in a handful or in a couple tablespoons of soil. So of an active soil. So that's just amazing what we can do.
And I think it's a real, I think it's like one of the uncharted territories. I think we're still learning stuff all the time about our soils and soil life. So.
And a lot of what we're learning is from past experiences. We're building on what was done.
Yeah.
Yep. Anybody else have any questions? You're welcome to speak up now. We still have 5 minutes. What are you thinking right now? Did we help? Did we muddy the waters? Give me some feedback. So my position is also funded by the National Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts, NACD. So it's kind of the same type of organization that's doing Jamie's right now. So. The pavilion that Joelle's talking about the next time, it really will be nice to sit down and see in person. I know that's something that I've really been missing over the last couple of years. I'm really glad we can start in that again.
And it'll be really, since we're having 2 speakers next month at Coffee and Pollinators, Marissa Renz will be talking about different ways that you can benefit pollinators, in your backyard, in your garden, on your farm. And then Marissa will be helping teach us how to make a pollinator box. So keep an eye on your emails about if you want to be part of that, and see how you can either purchase how to make a pollinator box or to see how you can be part of that.
That I have a little experience with on my farm. A local gentleman, a company, a Rackaway Honey Company, has 400 and some hives, and he normally collects them on a piece of property I have that I keep for parking and for field days and so forth on grass. He collects them hives and ships them either to California, to the almond groves, or to Florida for vegetable and fruit production down there. So it's amazing how our honeybees are moving across the country to help places that are short supply and need them. So, well, Jamie, any closing comments? Or?
Yeah, we've got real quick. We got a question that came up the last minute. I believe it asked about nitrogen fixing crops. Let's see. If you mulch with a nitrogen fixing cover crop, if you turn it into soil, do you lose the nitrogen fixing ability? Well, the nitrogen fixing ability, I'll let Mike chime in here real quick, was gained through the roots. You know, it's actually in the roots and stuff, you know, and the nodules and things of that nature that take place. But go ahead, Mike. You're just itching to talk about it.
Yeah, the nodules, that is the part of the legumes that I love. And the nodules that form in the roots, and you guys can dig up your clovers, dig up any of the hairy vetches, and you'll find these, even soybeans as a legume. And the nodules are in the soil on the roots, and they're little bulbs or they're little rosettes in a hairy vetch. And they're filled with a liquid, and that is the nitrogen. Naturally, what they'll do is the roots and the microbes will form that. It will max out, and then it'll release itself back into the soil. If you're turning them up to oxygen to atmosphere, they will go back into the atmosphere. They won't stay in the soil, so you'll lose quite a bit of it. So that, I think that's what your question is going to. By turning that to atmosphere, they will go back in the atmosphere. We are 80 or 90% nitrogen when we're breathing here, so 80%. So yeah, so that is a good point. When I'm digging up my hairy vetch this spring, it's amazing the size of that nodule with just a small plant, with a 6-8 inch plant. And when you turn it into a 2-foot plant or a 3-foot plant, it's so much more. But as with all these cover crops, I would suggest you don't let them go to seed, because they will turn into an unwanted supply sometime. So limit the seed. Hairy vetch is one of them that is a hardened seed, and the saying goes with that one, you can, if you let that go to seed and get into your soil, you can deed that with your land. So it just means it's a hardened seed, and it lasts a long time. So I think we're good. Thank you, Jamie. It was great having you on, and
thank you very much for having me.
Great having all the questions we did. So
yeah, absolutely.
Looking forward to next month, and we will go live and online. So thank you all for joining. Goodbye.